Oh hi, I didn't see you there. My name is Bliss Foster and we are back with season 5. I have missed you people so much and I hope you have missed me also. We are going to dive directly into a new Margiela episode and I am beyond excited because this thing is officially off and running and we have so much more to cover. Fall/Winter 1991 is the first time of many that Martin Margiela decided to do something kind of unusual for his presentation. It would be kind of difficult for you to consider this to be a runway show in the traditional sense. There was a couple of different reasons for that. There was the looming Gulf War that was coming in, so politically everything was a little bit tense at the time, but also they continued to have really serious financial limitations. That will continue to be the reality as long as Martin Margiela is there. As always, the Women's Collections book gives us a good summary of what they did for the invitation. Quote, Margiela abandoned the idea of a traditional fashion show, choosing instead to present the collection in his studio. A handwritten phone number on a piece of square notepaper was sent to guests. Telephone 142213610. A recorded message in several languages informed the caller of the time and place where the Fall/Winter collection would be shown. The message was confusing, and several members of the international press arrived at closing time only to find the doors locked. Elusive as always. This very unusual location that they've selected for the presentation continues two different narratives that we've been following so far. One, we are in the second arrondissement, which means we're the closest to Paris Fashion Week that we've ever been thus far. This is just a 7-minute drive from the Louvre. This is extremely close. And two, this is continuing Margiela's theme of bringing the audience into the art with him. We've seen a lot of different variations on showing you process and showing you how the art came about. And here they're actually inviting them into the studio itself so that everyone can see how the sausage gets made. And actually, I have a really interesting note for us this week. This doesn't necessarily apply to this show specifically, but actually to Spring/Summer 1990, the third show that Martin put on. They actually were on the official Paris Fashion Week calendar at that point. They kind of muscled their way in, but for the first two shows, they were not sanctioned. As we all know, Fashion Week is such a buzzword that there's a lot of people who try to kind of horn in on that space without actually being a part of it. If you're involved in fashion professionally, you know that there is no shortage of people trying to swindle you out of your money so that you can be a part of Fashion Week, when in fact they have nothing to do with actual Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week or whatever it is. I think this mostly comes because you can't copyright the term Fashion Week. If some random person goes and holds up Levi's jackets in the street in Paris and goes, I am part of Fashion Week. This is my fashion show. That does not mean that he's part of Fashion Week. You are a part of Fashion Week when you are officially on the schedule. And that means that editors and buyers and everybody else will be coming to your show. So that started in Spring/Summer 1990 for Martin Margiela, and he continued to not participate in Fashion Week in the official capacity of showing at the Louvre. He continues to just do these shows all over the city. I received that information recently, so that's why we're bringing it up now, but it's a good thing to keep in mind going forward. So the buyers and the editors are coming to this studio at the bequest of this weird message that they received, and they are walking through the 3 rooms in this studio. On the walls of one of the rooms, there is a projector that's displaying video, and that's the actual video footage that we're going to be looking at today, is the video footage that was being shown on the wall during this presentation. Pretty huge deal with this kind of open house studio visit kind of collection presentation thing. This was the first time where Martin Margiela actually whited out a whole space. This has become a huge signature of the Maison Martin Margiela brand. Members of the design team and Martin himself have confirmed that the 2 reasons that they did this is because it's cheap and because it's incredibly visually effective. If you white out an entire space, you make everything in the room white, then as the day continues, the hours draw on, there's these marks on the floor from where people have walked. If people touch the walls in a certain place enough times, that part of the wall becomes a little bit darker from the oils in the hands. In the second room of the studio, the walls were covered in these thank you notes from stylists and photographers and hairdressers and all these models and everybody, and there were more felt pins that were hanging from the ceiling where everyone was encouraged to write their own little memento of their visit. There's also apparently a red room where models with red hair were wearing these bright red clothes. We don't have any photography of this. It's apparently just lost to the sands of time. If anyone happens to know of any photography of this one room of this presentation, please hit me up, because apparently it does exist. We have like actual records of this stuff happening, but it's only in writing. If you could, please, thank you. The third room of the studio was where the projector was actually showing the film that we're looking at today. And then the fourth room, it was the confetti room, where models were just like tossing confetti and saying goodbye. And also there were just models walking around in the clothes themselves, and when buyers or editors would walk up to them, the girls would give an explanation as to what they were wearing and kind of show off the details and stuff. This is a really personable way of doing this. It feels very intimate, I feel like, and especially because a lot of these women that are involved with Margiela at this point have been there since the very beginning. They themselves have a very vested interest in the success of this thing, so I'm sure they were selling it really effectively. There is so much excellent stuff that we are covering this week. I am so excited to be back, and I'm so excited that you are joining me. Let's do this. Over the break, I launched a Patreon, and if you really love this channel and content, you should support me on Patreon. We don't come out with episodes as fast as I'd like to, and that's because I'm working a 50-hour-a-week job, but I would really like to double the amount of content that I am putting out, but I can only do that if I have income to mitigate taking less time at work. It's cool though, because you won't be doing me any favors. The lowest tier is $3 a month, and you would immediately get to start up on the Discord channel that is only for my patrons. It's like a 24-hour fashion friends hangout. It's really, really cool. There's a lot of really knowledgeable people in there. So support me on Patreon. Link is down in the description. Thank you. So the footage that we're looking at today that was projected up on the wall in the studio for editors and for buyers to look at, it's a Super 8 film that was shot by Martin himself. It's pretty self-explanatory. It just follows one of the official Margiela girls, Christina de Koning. She's just wearing Margiela's clothes and walking around Paris. This first look that they show is absolutely gorgeous. This top thing that sort of looks like a breastplate is a reference to a 15th or 16th century partlet. I have yet to really uncover any rhyme or reason to these historic references. It often feels with Martin like someone just ran into a museum and grabbed something they thought was cool and ran out and immediately made a replica of it. I'm not really noticing a pattern of what kinds of things he's taking or of what era he's even taking from it. It really just seems to be like spinning the Rolodex of history and grabbing something that seems cool. But in this look we see a very high neck. The whole thing is very modest, and it's in super sharp contrast to the very playful and revealing clothing that were coming out at the time. In his own words documentary, Martin goes into a lot of detail about zigging when everyone else was zagging. It was a very playful and kind of skimpy time in fashion. There were a lot of short skirts and a lot of just generally revealing clothing, which I don't think he had any problem with, but he knew that to set himself apart, he could make something that was not anything like that, but was still very playful. And since the dawn of the brand, they've experimented with ways of doing really complex layering while keeping a very trim silhouette. Obviously, when you're trying to layer up multiple t-shirts or sweatshirts that are fairly form-fitting, it becomes like kind of a crumpled up mess on your body really quickly. But by piecing apart garments, they were able to achieve this desired effect in a comfortable and functional way. So we can see that underneath everything else on the top, there's this white button-up dress shirt, and you can see that the sleeves are way, way too long, and so they've actually folded the cuffs up onto the shirt that's layered on top of it. Then over top of the white shirt, there's this black, sheer, long piece with the Margiela shoulder that is kind of indicative of a lot of the direction that they've been going in since the very beginning. Then over top of that, there's this partlet piece that just covers the bust, goes about halfway down the rib cage, and then in the back, you actually have these ties that you can tie over the stomach. That's all part of that partlet piece. It also really helps to press down the area right here so that the Margiela shoulder can really pop off of the shoulder. The partlet also seems to be part of this ongoing theme of doing urban, worker class, kind of apron almost looking things. There's just not a lot of very fashionable clothes that have these ties that go in places like over your stomach other than in a kitchen. And we're not done there. There's actually a disconnected turtleneck piece that is a separate piece from the rest of the outfit. Obviously with this silhouette, there would be no way to fit a turtleneck under that white shirt, so they have to improvise and just add the detail to the top. And let's dive into this skirt just a little bit here. This brown skirt. In the women's collection book, the way this is described is it's a ribbed wool skirt with exposed seams and extra long running stitches. the skirt was intentionally called the skirt with floating threads so that the customers did not cut them. So the exposed seams you can see here on the sides, these darker threads out there, and those are the exposed seams. Then I believe that the running stitches is this stitch that's down here near the bottom that goes most of the way up the skirt. We sort of get a better view of this skirt in this image right here where the model is seated. Running stitches are not a very secure way of binding two pieces of fabric together, so it's probably good that they gave them a fair warning to not cut them. Early on in the video, we see them actually painting these jean cutoffs in the studio. So this is a normal pair of denim that they cut above the pockets and then painted white in the studio. This is meant to be used as a belt. We've of course had a lot of different examples of things being painted white for these shows. We see them actually making the clog that's a winter variant on the tabby clog sandal from last season. We see Martin's actual hands tying up a jabot. This is something that we've seen from the very beginning. This was in the first look that they ever put onto a runway. Later on in the video, we see someone actually cutting up socks so that they can make the, all rise, the sock sweater. This is arguably one of the coolest looks in Margiela history. I realize that I say that every single episode of this series, but I really, really love the sock sweater. The only real disadvantage I can think of is that because of the size of socks, this sweater is incredibly tiny. All right, so confession, you can be seated. The sock sweater was actually something that Martin introduced last season in spring, summer 1991, but because the videography for that episode was so limited, we really didn't get any kind of real footage of it, so I had no idea that it was coming out. So we're gonna talk about it now. Sock sweaters are something that the man himself makes using these socks, and even goes on years later to show everyone how they can make that sweater themselves at home. This is from the first issue, the Margiela issue, of a magazine whose, the name of the magazine is called A Magazine Curated By, and then it's whoever's being featured in that issue. Sometimes this is shortened to be just A Magazine. The curved part of the sock, the heel part of the sock, is strategically placed in areas like the elbows or the shoulders, just places on the body where there's a little bit more curvature. It's the same mentality that Margiela himself always carries, which is just a mentality of reuse. Also worth noting is that these are good old-fashioned Army Navy surplus store socks. They were dyed in a washing machine, and the different materials of the different socks took to that dye differently, so they actually turned out with these beautifully different contrasting shades. I love the sock sweater so much. Also in this look, she is wearing a skirt that has pretty clearly been made of men's pinstripe trouser material, with buttons running the entire way down the skirt. Such a cool look. Here we can see a nylon top that was later featured in Elle magazine. We can see that they kept Martin's little styling detail that was first shown in the fall-winter 1989 show of tucking the hair into the tops. This is particularly beautiful here because we can actually see the hair through the nylon. And speaking of that show, the way that the denim belt is being worn here over a skirt is another play on multiple bottom garments being combined. That's another thing that we saw from fall-winter 1989 with the pantsuits that were also skirt suits. And of course, Martin and his team are adjusting these things, and they are making them actually work for the purpose that they're using them for. It doesn't feel like you're just sort of like slapping things on where they don't belong. They are making it so that it feels natural to use it in that way. This is such an awesome addition to that poor girl in Paris storyline that we've kind of been unofficially tracing through these shows. That, of course, is not something that Martin ever outlined himself in any way. It's just something that I've kind of envisioned looking at all of this stuff. This person who is too poor to really be able to buy a new outfit for the party that they're going to, and so they just kind of find things around their apartment and make a way to make them fresh again. It's also very cute how the painted denim was converted into cuffs so that this look could be complete. Here we can see a typical tank top, but it's being paired with these shoulder caps as separates. This is actually something that we first saw in spring-summer 1990, though you would have never guessed that, because it was really hard for a lot of these looks to figure out what was one garment, what was separate garments, what was even going on with this stuff. They're beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it is just really hard to tell what's going on with those particular garments. We can also see, because of the footage here, that these shoulder caps are not just cut fabric that's laid over the shoulders. They're very carefully structured. This is the Margiela shoulder without the tension of a full garment pulling it in both directions. This is what the Margiela shoulder looks like in isolation. And speaking of the Margiela shoulder in isolation, they also demonstrated the opposite of the Margiela shoulder in isolation with this cape piece. We can see that the back is very tucked in. The same details that they've always had are being applied here, where there's some string so that you could tie it around your stomach and keep that back very trim looking. There are no shoulders on this piece. It's literally just a cape, but the Margiela shoulders have been added into that cape. So he's bringing back a piece that he first showed in spring/summer 1990 so that he can show the contrast to that piece. We are always in this mode of DIY with Martin. Confetti can now pretty much be confirmed as an ongoing theme. Margiela's clothes are not a dark, brooding mystery. They are a celebration. Also, if you haven't fallen in love with Christina by now, I don't know how to help you. Here we see Martin's hands tying an outfit into place. Again, we're seeing these complex layers, and we're seeing the kinds of garment details that are most often seen in urban working class uniforms like kitchen aprons. You can see here that this skirt has these permanent crease marks in it that will actually never go away. It's something that looks like it was just taken out of grandma's attic and unfolded for the party. And in that same look, we can see a jean jacket that's been painted white and then cut to become essentially a bib. We can see these little ties around the back to nip it at the waist. The jacket from fall/winter 1989 was reintroduced in this collection with slight variations to color and material. We have a short version of that jacket, and we also have a long version that is shown in the video, of course. There's so many little loving details on this. The pockets are absolutely gargantuan, which is a nice structural thing, but also there's really small stuff, like in the elbows here we have these little darts that are placed. This is another really interesting jacket that they have in the collection. This is the front of the jacket here. This is the back of the jacket. This is very reminiscent of women's kind of 19-teens World War I era jackets. I especially like this really beautiful pleating in the back, this really broad pleating. That's the kind of thing that you really don't see at all anymore. And I'm sure was also something that you didn't really see in the 90s when Martin was actually making this stuff, but it's just such a beautiful structural detail that really just makes a big old difference when you're looking at a coat. This is another incredible knitwear piece that Christina is wearing in this photograph. So to go through this kind of slowly, it looks like we're wearing a white button-up dress shirt that you can see is also too long, so they've rolled the cuffs back. And then we also have this turtleneck sweater that has been slit open at the sides. So the shoulder there is still the white button-up shirt, but the front and the back of the sweater have these ties attached to them so that it's slit open and it is definitely like hanging there, but you can tie it off into your stomach and your back so that you have it actually like form-fitting down the way that a sweater would normally be. The disconnected sleeves of the sweater can be seen farther down her arms. It's like a sweater has been exploded open. We can also see a really interesting detail in the skirt. The skirt has a self belt, I guess is what that would be called, because it's a belt that's made of the same material as the skirt itself. It's fun stuff. Very, very pretty. This show seems to be the first place where Martin begins to officially back off from the press. There were obviously a lot of editors that wanted to get statements and stuff from him, and he was hiding literally the entire time that this presentation was happening. And he would just send one of his colleagues out to speak in his place. It was literally like a game of telephone. The editors would ask the colleague a question and be like, I need to know this from Martin. And he would go back into this room that no one else could go into and ask Martin the question, and Martin would give him an answer, and the colleague would go back and answer the question. One such question was them asking about the crazy sock sweaters, and he reiterated them, something that we've covered before, which is For my collection, I wanted and needed tight-fitting sweaters. Without a manufacturer, I had to improvise. He also gives his first statement about deconstruction, which is actually a term previously that I thought that he never actually used himself, but it looks like this is something where he is addressing the term directly. He says, "When I deconstruct a new or old garment, I don't believe I am destroying it. It is a way of giving it a new life in another form." And to LUSA, he gave one of his greatest quotes of all time, which is, "My clothes appeal to women of a certain mindset, rather than of a specific age or physique." Beautiful stuff. That is it for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. It is so good to be back. I'm so excited to be here. Please go support me on Patreon. At this point, the Margiela series will continue until the end of 2021, which is forever away. I would really like to wrap this up in 2020 so that we can move on and do a whole new series on another designer that we all love, like Vivienne Westwood or Yohji Yamamoto, or, I mean, there's a million choices that we can do for that. And again, I'm not doing you any favors. Like, the private Discord is really popping, so, you know, sign up today. Also, please follow me on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, which are the only sites that I am really active on. I love interacting with you people, so please hit me up and say hello. I like to say hi back and start conversations with people, so do that. I love you like I love anime. Goodbye.